You've done it again. You're standing directly in front of someone you've met at least 3 times, and her name is just gone. Not hovering at the edge of your memory, not sitting somewhere retrievable, completely absent, like your brain never bothered filing it in the first place. And the worst part isn't the blank. It's the 15 seconds of pure improvised theater that follow. The nodding, the careful smiling, the quiet, desperate hope that someone else in the room will say her name first, or that her phone rings, or honestly, that literally anything else happens before you have to admit it. Psychology says this isn't rudeness. It isn't a sign that you're careless or slow or moving through the world without actually registering people. There's something very specific happening in the female brain during social interactions, and once you understand it, the guilt starts to look a lot less justified. When you meet someone new, your brain isn't doing one thing. It's doing everything at once. Reading her face, registering the tone of the room, calculating where you stand socially, whether she seems warm or guarded, whether you're supposed to hug or shake hands, or just smile and nod. And underneath all of that, there's a quieter process running, deciding what you're going to say next, how you're going to come across, whether you seem normal. Your working memory, the short-term holding space in your prefrontal cortex, is already juggling 6 things. And into that exact moment of cognitive chaos, she hands you one arbitrary sounder name. Hi, I'm Jessica. Okay, Jessica. But Jessica doesn't connect to anything you already know. It doesn't trigger an image, a feeling, an association, or a memory. It just sits there, isolated in a brain that is genuinely too busy to babysit it. This hits women differently, and not in a small way. Women tend to process social interactions with higher emotional bandwidth than men do on average, reading subtext, managing how they're coming across, tracking the emotional temperature of the room, monitoring for shifts in tone. That's a lot of parallel processing happening before she even finishes saying her own name. The label arrives at the exact moment your brain has the least available space to hold it. So it doesn't stick. Not because you weren't paying attention in the way that matters, but because your brain made a quiet executive call without consulting you. It looked at everything it was already managing and decided the name was the thing that could wait. The problem is, names don't wait. They vanish. And what most people don't realize is that this isn't just a timing problem. Names aren't just arriving at a bad moment. They're structurally, almost by design, the hardest thing for any brain to hold on to. In 1987, 2 researchers named McWeeny and Ellis ran a study that explains this better than anything else I've come across. They showed people a photo of a man and told one group that he was a baker by profession. They told a separate group that his surname was Baker. Same word, same sound. Days later, the people who learned it as an occupation remembered it far more easily than the people who learned it as a name. That's the Baker-Baker paradox, and it tells you something uncomfortable about how memory actually works. When Baker is a job, your brain immediately starts building connections. You think of flour, bread, early mornings, the smell of something warm. It slots neatly into a whole web of things you already know. When Baker is just someone's last name, none of that happens. It sits there with nothing attached to it. No hook, no anchor, no web, just a sound. Names are semantically empty. They don't describe anything, they don't explain anything, and they don't connect to anything you already have stored. Your brain, which is an incredibly efficient machine built to prioritize what's useful and let go of what looks at a name and basically sees a floating file with no folder to put it in. Think about the last time you attended a funeral. You probably remember specific things with unusual clarity. The smell in the room, the quality of the silence, someone's face when they were trying not to cry, a sentence somebody said that landed somewhere in your chest and stayed there. What you almost certainly don't remember is what was printed on the order of service. Your brain made a decision without asking you about what was worth holding on to. And it wasn't the text. It was never the text. Names are the order of service. Everything else about a person is the funeral. But the Baker-Baker paradox only explains part of it. The other part is more personal, and for a lot of women, more recognizable. There's a phenomenon called the Nextin line effect, documented in 1973 by psychologist Malcolm Brenner. He found that people waiting their turn to speak in a group showed dramatically reduced memory for what the person just before them said, not because they weren't listening, because in their heads, they'd already moved on. They were preparing, rehearsing, mentally editing what they were about to say while the other person was still talking. For women with high social self-awareness or social anxiety, which overlaps with it more than people admit, this isn't a situational thing. It's the default. You're never fully in the moment of introduction because a part of your brain is already running ahead of it, checking whether you're making enough eye contact, whether you should ask a follow-up question, whether you seem genuinely warm or just performatively warm. The name arrives during that window, and you're already gone. This is not a memory problem, it's a preoccupation problem, and those two things require completely different responses. Worth saying something about the other side of this, because it matters. When someone forgets your name, especially more than once, it lands like a quiet verdict. You didn't register. You weren't memorable enough. That's what the brain hears, even when it's completely wrong. The person who forgot your name probably thought about you afterward. They might remember exactly what you said about your sister, or the specific way you laughed at something, or an opinion you threw out casually that stuck with them for days. They were present, just not for that one part. People who forget names easily tend to share something else. Their memory isn't weak, it's built differently. It's contextual, associative, and deeply tied to emotional experience. They remember stories. They remember the look on someone's face at a specific moment. They remember what a room felt like. Ask someone like this what a woman was wearing at a party 3 years ago, and there's a real chance they can tell you. Ask them the name of the person standing next to her, and you'll get a long pause, followed by nothing. Their brain was there. It was cataloging everything: the texture of the evening, the energy between people, the conversation that mattered. It just wasn't cataloging the label. This is not a flaw. It's an architecture. And it happens to be an architecture that makes someone genuinely good at the things that require reading people emotional attunement, the kind of listening that makes someone feel actually heard rather than just processed. It's worse at one specific thing, holding an arbitrary sound under social pressure, while simultaneously performing competence. A lot of women carry a quiet, low-grade version of shame around this. The belief that forgetting someone's name is proof of something unflattering about you, that you're absent, or self-absorbed, or you just don't care enough. That belief rarely gets examined. It usually just sits there, making you feel worse every time it happens again. You remember what she said about her job changing. You remember the specific thing she laughed at. You remember her take on something that nobody else at the table agreed with. You were there. The name was always going to be the hardest part for a mind like yours to catch. When you want to fix it, the method is simple. Repeat her name back out loud in the first few seconds after she says it. Connect it to a face you already know, or a word it sounds like, or anything that gives it a hook. You're doing manually what your brain won't do, automatically building a bridge between that sound and something that already has a place. Forgetting names doesn't mean you move through the world without registering people. It means your brain prioritizes the texture of who someone is over the arbitrary sound their parents picked before they'd done a single thing worth remembering. The name was always the least interesting thing about her. Next time you meet someone, try one thing before anything else. Say her name back out loud in the first sentence after she says it. That's the bridge your brain needs, and it takes about 2 seconds to build. Most people who watch this will recognize themselves in it and then do nothing differently. You don't have to be one of them. If you found this interesting, the next video goes even deeper into how the mind actually works, the parts most people never examine. If you want to understand people on a completely different level, that one's worth watching next,